All right, so hopefully this is going to play. No, hold on. All right, so this is one working, and then I'll kind of go back through actually how we got here. So the main difference is, unlike before, again, this thing's going like 600 degrees and then 800 degrees. And all you have to do is, there's a couple different pieces, but you're just animating the rotate Y again. And it, like I said, the kind of things of converting from angles and how much have I changed for last time and steps and all that stuff, all that sort of calculation is built into the object, so you don't really have to worry about it. So if you can see the little guy here. Yep. So how do we get there? Actually, go ahead and start looking at these. Have a look at this stuff, and we'll go through wiring and everything here in a minute. So starting from a new file, we're going to have to update some of our kind of other files that we've installed before to get it to work, and add on some other things as well. You'll also be getting from me here in a bit in this package file the new sort of Arduino file. And the important thing to notice on there is these new guys, which are called stepper 1, 2, 3, or stepper 1 and 2. To know where we're going to start plugging these guys, where we're going to start plugging them in. So each one of the steppers takes 4 pins on the Arduino. And you can see here, this is going to say, so each one, so the yellow wire is going to be 22, 24, 26, 28. And if you're looking at it like on the board itself, the pins on the end, that's what we're talking about. So it's going to be just like, they're even numbers because like the big fat plug goes 22, 23, 24, 25. So it's just literally going straight down the one line. So the other thing we're going to add in is this new script, which is the MK stepper. So if we had make servo, we have to do make stepper because it connects slightly differently. So Windows, it goes in my documents, my 2012 scripts, and then Mac, it's the so other things, so user, shared, Autodesk, scripts. And we are actually going to have to switch out, I forgot to change it the first time, the servo.py. So on Windows, it's the one that's actually in Python, the C on your C drive, Python 2.7. After I go through this, though, I'll make sure everybody's set up and getting it working. So to start, the overall plugin is the same. So in the plugin manager, the servo write plugin, that's all, doesn't change, same one as we used before. But if we want to add something to it, we need to import the stepper object. So I'm just going to do File and Import. So in this package you'll get, so there's stepper object and there's this guy called stepper output, and then it's a Maya file. So if you look at it, especially in the outliner, it's actually a couple of different objects. There's this little pointer guy, and then underneath it is a locator. The reason why that is it takes a couple of little tricks to get everything calculated right. But the important thing is, after you import the object, if you want this thing to move, you're actually going to animate the rotate Y of this upper object. Or if you had other things over here as well, like if you wanted to just leave this thing on its own, and you had, if you remember, we could say also, you know, this guy is so if I wanted to just, if I was going to do the rotate Z on that one, so I could say let's do it here. So yeah, got this. So there. 400. Key it again, and then if I So if I wanted to connect these two together, I can always just do it with an expression. So I can say in window expression editor. Since I have it selected, it gives me its name, which is kind of nice. So I can also just pick the rotate Y. Copy it, and I'm going to say that's equal to P torus 1.rz. So basically, instead of animating it directly, I animated an object and then just connected it. So then to get it connected, it's similar to before, but the important thing here is when you're actually creating the output node, you actually pick the locator instead of the object. So you can see here the stepper output. The locator object is what you want to pick, and then do mk stepper. Yep. So it's the new script we just put in there. looks exactly the same, but it just does different stuff. So then I say attach. So that all seems great. The only thing that's left then is when doing the output number, the way the Arduino code is set up is that the steppers start at number 5. So if you're doing 2 of them, the first one would be number 5, the second would be number 6, and 7. So we're going to just start it at 5, so I just put that as 5. It's just kind of like an address. It knows that's where it starts. So now, if that magically works, yeah, so now we're spinning. So one of the things that's sometimes really useful with steppers, there's 2 different things you can do with them, right? Sometimes, and especially when we get to the bigger ones, you can get fairly precise motion over a longer range. But another thing that you tend to get into is sort of repetitive motion, right? So continually moving, doing the same thing over and over, stepping forward, stepping backwards. And like say you wanted this thing just to turn at a certain rate or go back and forth, you don't have to keep setting keyframes. So we can basically set one example and just tell it to repeat, right? So you can set kind of repetitive motion. So I'm going to stick with the one we have here and pick my torus, since that's actually what's keyframed, and go into the graph editor and then hit F to frame it. So this is, that's why. Leave it there. So let's say I set this up as a first and as a sort of rhythm, I want this to just keep going, saying to here and then back down, here and down. I mean, I could just keep setting keyframes, but there's a nice little feature where you can just tell it to repeat. I'm going to give it more frames. So and so what I'm going to do is picking the rotate Z. And if you go under curves, the first 2 options are great terms such as pre-infinity and post-infinity. I didn't say it actually made sense, but there you go. But essentially what it means is from where you actually set the keys, repeating before you set the keys or repeating after you set the keys. Since we started at 0, we're going to do post-infinity. And in this case, I'm going to hit oscillate. The other thing I'm going to do is under view, I'm going to turn on infinity. And it's a little bit hard to see with the light, but you can see now it added in. It essentially said, since I said oscillate, it means go up to here and then back, and up and back and up and back. And if I change this, it basically updates everything else. Right? So you can set a pattern with 2 keys instead of having to set all of them. So that would be oscillate if I'd done. So if I look at that and I hit play, and if you look at the motor, it's going forward, going backwards. It's a nice little trick. Just by, essentially 2 control points, you can have, sort of almost infinitely repeating motion. The other things would be, if I switched it to, if I did cycle, it's a little hard to see it. So it does it, and then it snaps back to 0, and then it does it again. And then it snaps back to 0, and does it again, and does it again. It's basically just repeating it rather than going up and going down. Or, like if I did linear, no, that doesn't do it. That's not right. Not sure why it's doing that. Essentially, it should just continue going there. That's a little weird. Skip that for a moment. So again, it's going to take a little longer to set them up, but I mean the logic's pretty straightforward with these things. Instead of servos, you give them an angle. If you think about a regular motor or like a light, you can turn it on, turn it off, tell it go forward or tell it to go backwards. These things, it's just like step forward, this many, step backwards. And it's all kind of a linear thing. What then becomes important with dealing with them as a machine is, again, like a CNC, knowing where your home is, right? So knowing when you start this thing at 0, in the physical realm, you've got a way of knowing, like, all right, this is my start point. This is my 0, 0, 0, because it's just going to start stepping forward from there. It becomes clear when you start doing it. And so to run through it one more time. So again, making sure the plugin's loaded as before. And then importing the object. If if you're using more than one stepper, you just import it again. So then, if I say I'll just animate it directly this time. So I'm going to key it. And then to set it up, I pick the locator and say MK stepper. Say attach. And then change this to number 5. Yep. One of the reasons why steppers are especially more useful than just kind of standard little DC motors is, generally the way you get DC motors to go slower is to give them less voltage, right? So if you give them less voltage, they move slower, but it also means they have less power, right? So it becomes a sort of nightmare to get them to go slow because they tend to not have enough electricity to make them actually turn in simple DC ones. So, things with steppers, it's not like it's using any less. It's just only stepping forward and backwards, right? So it's just telling how quickly rather than changing the voltage. So the voltage is always constant. And more importantly now is probably the joys of getting them set up. So a bit of wiring and that's it. Make sense? Then give me just 1 second and I'll upload the link to the website so you can get all the files, and then we'll go from there.